This is The Art of Life. I'm your host, Willow Chang, and we broadcast live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. What does The Art of Life entail? Well, a little snippet of it would be this. Sacred practice, being bon vivant, committed to your craft, and usually wearing many, many hats. And our guest, Eden Lee Murray Jelinek, fits all of those and many, many more. We're delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you, Willow. It's good to be here with you.
Now, we know that you're apparently a ThinkTech Hawaii repeat offender. And I only know this because when I was looking for a picture of you on our friend Google, I saw an image of you on ThinkTech, and I thought, oh, she's already been on. But you've had so many lives, and there's so many things to talk about, so I'm not going to fear at all about that. Welcome, repeat offender.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully we'll have you again. Let's get right into it.
Go for it.
Some people know you as a director, some people know you as an actress, or maybe the politically correct thing is to say an actor. Clearly an advocate for the arts. You wear, as I've said, many hats. Tell us about how you just got into all of this stuff. How did Eden Lee come to be?
One step at a time. I'm steeped in theatrical background. My mother was a very, very fine actress. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri originally, and I grew up...
Missouri. The show me state.
Been long enough away to say Missouri. You're supposed to say Missouri if you're from there. I grew up watching my mother on stage. I was thrilled. I remember the day I was a preschooler, and she had been a professional actress. She trained in New York, the American Academy of Dramatic Art, etc. Was a part, and this is a long time ago, in the 30s, like before World War II. She was in a national broadcast radio company, an ensemble, and the idea was that there was the family, and then there was the swing. So she got to play anybody extra that came into the show. She did different accents. She was wonderful. And then this group was supposed to be ready to move into television when television broke commercially, but then was World War II, etc. And that was the end of that. And then when her father said, I think it's time you came back to Kansas City, back in the day you listened to your father when he said that, right? So zoop, there she went. And World War II was over. She was married within 6 months and then was following the string of the wife, mother, very conventional.
Nuclear family.
Nuclear family, very conventional. But she never gave up theater. She would do community theater. She did a lot of children's theater, which is where I first started watching her. But I remember the day I went with them. This is before preschool even, so on dinosaur days, right?
Right.
I was allowed to pull the curtain. This is when the shows were put on in the WPA schools in Kansas City. You know, you have to cart all your stuff up to the second floor where the auditoriums were. I was allowed to stand backstage and pull the curtain this one day.
And that's a very important job if you are unaware of how important
that is. If you're 4 years old too, it's like you make it all happen. So I came back to this backstage, and I saw these women that I had just watched change into costume with my mother, friends, and they were taking place, and I pulled the string, the curtains opened, the light hit them, and they became something else, someone else. And I remember at 4 going, I want that.
Transformative power of theater.
Absolutely, right? And I would always go backstage after my mom would come off, and I would see her before she took her makeup off because I wanted to see what that was up close. My sister, 2 years younger, would have nothing to do with her until the face was off, the costume was gone, and it was mommy again, right? Not so for me, right? So that was the beginning. That's when I fell in love with theater. I've done it all my life, whether in school. I went through, well, there have been periods of life where I've said, that's it, I have to be real now. I have to take life seriously and do real person stuff.
Can we insert the laugh track now?
Well, but that's always been the point where my life has veered off track.
Yeah.
And it's been dysfunctional. It's you know, something's missing. And every time when I've gotten back involved with theater in some aspect of it, everything lines back up again. And I mean, this is the break between high school and college. I made that mistake. The break between college and, well, the deal was I was to come back from college and marry well, right? But I married well, but not the way they had in mind, I think, right? But each time I went away and then came back to it, like I say, the balance came back. And one point that I think is really, really important is when my own love for theater moved out to include working with kids in theater. And right after, well, when I got my Master's of Fine Arts at University of Missouri, Kansas City, we were allowed, the graduate students were allowed to teach if we wanted to, and I just didn't go there because I figured no matter, I was 30 at that point too, I figured, you know, you have to know a lot to dare to teach, right? So I didn't. But after I finished that semester, I went back to New York to meet, well, to join Roger Jelinek, my husband, and meet his 2 children before we were to get married.
Right.
And I had just finished, in my Master's of Fine Arts program, I just finished doing a production of As You Like It, which is one of my very favorite Shakespeare plays. I played Phoebe, and it was a great production, and my husband's daughter, who was then 11, the kids' stepchildren, 11 and 15, it's tough, and they lived with us, right? He said, well, Claire's in rehearsals for her 7th grade play, As You Like It. Why don't you go watch a rehearsal? And I said, well, sure, let's do that, right? So I sat in the auditorium and I watched this teacher go through the motions with their run-through. And at the end of the run-through, Jean Brock turns to me and says, now the lady who's going to be Mrs. Jelinek, I think Claire's new stepmother is out there. And did you have anything, I know you're an actress, did you have anything you'd like to say? And I don't remember going from the auditorium to the stage, but I knew I was up on stage and I worked with those kids for an hour. And they were just like, it was so much fun. And from that moment, that was 30 years ago, and from that moment on, I've just always looked for a way to, it's not so much, it's not important to be on stage as it used to be to me, but it's really important to share what I've learned with kids who I can recognize myself as they start out. And as the education director at the Hawaii Theater now, I teach 3 different ensembles, and I started with a high school ensemble. And the first year I was terrified, but I remember sitting there and just telling them, you know, everybody teaches differently and you'll have teachers tell you other things, but what you're going to hear from me is what I wish people had told me when I was your age. You know, and
we are connected at the brain. You may not realize that. I say the same thing when I teach students because I think there's something very genuine about that. It's you learn by doing, you know?
Right.
Absolutely.
Wow. And you don't know how much you've learned until you set out to pass it on.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, right? I mean, the one thing I remember growing up with actors who were, what's the word, plagued by the paralysis of perfectionism, right? And I remember sitting with the kids, I forget which group it wasn't my first year group, but they were all about being good, right?
Yeah.
And that sticks you in a corner and doesn't let you out. And finally I said, you guys, it's not about being good, it's about getting better. It's a dynamic that keeps you moving forward.
And then also, I mean, my 2 cents on the matter, because I have this discussion with many different people, not just artists. I think if you set that as the goal, the carrot of perfectionism, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Right. Because the reality is how do you measure that, and whose definition is that, and what essentially is really perfect? I would say outside of the natural world, there isn't a lot that's created that's perfect, but it can be fabulous, it can be inspiring, it can be awe-inducing, it can be genuine, and there's a multitude of things that you can aspire to. But perfection to me, it's like, well, also if you were to reach perfection, where do you go from there?
It's a finite.
Yeah.
It's something that's
it's
finite.
a dead end, baby.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Embrace your flaws. Or something like that.
Well, in the flaws, again, you get kids who go, oh, I made a mistake. I said, no, you just went a way that you hadn't planned to go.
Yeah.
How do you get the fun out of that, you know?
Life is improvisation, really, essentially. You got to just land on your feet.
Absolutely.
Or something.
Right.
All that good stuff. So tell us how you got from the Big Apple to the pineapple.
Ah!
Because I'm sure there's a story there as well.
Yes. I was married to, I was on my own in the Big Apple for 4 years, and that was when I met Roger. But Roger had a different life going at that point, so I went, after 4 years in New York, I went back to Kansas City, got a Master's of Fine Arts. He got in touch with me 3 years later and said, you know, we're divorcing, and how are you? And we were married in 6 months. Just bam, right? And then I went back to New York, and we were in a place called Sneeden's Landing, which was just a...
You have to repeat that again. There's poetry in that name.
Sneeden's Landing. It's the landing. It's about 10 miles up the river, up the Hudson River from New York City.
Okay.
It's country. It's the landing across from Dobbs Ferry, and it's an idyllic place to live. Roger had been there for 20 years by the time I got there. Beautiful place to raise kids. Had been the artists' community or the summering place for the rich folk in New York City.
Okay,
right?
so this is not to be confused with the Hamptons, but a different...
No, very, very different milieu at the beginning. At the time he got out there, you could rent a house for like $97 a month.
Oh, goodness.
Just incredible, right?
Good old days.
But then they winterized the houses. People began to move out there for sure. By the time I got there, it was the hideaway for the stars. So I moved in and we had, Baryshnikov had a dacha on the Hudson. We had Al Pacino right below us. We had Bill Murray, Bill Hurt. I mean, it was just who's who, right?
Yeah.
And all because they'd said to their agents, we want to have a house in Sneedon's Landing. We don't care what it costs. So by the time I'd been there for then 4, 5, 6 years, the property rates were through the roof, along with it, insurance. I mean, the cost of living was just huge, right? So we by then had a child, Everett, who was, I guess he was maybe 1 when we decided that we just didn't want to live there anymore because it was no longer about the artists, the bohemians. It was about .com. It was about, the Hamptons. You do your stuff in it.
The jitney.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The spa. We're going to have, I remember one lady asked me to her 5-year-old's birthday party and she goes, and I'm setting an absolute limit on what can be spent for presents, no more than $50. And I'm going, good to know. Good to know. I won't go there. Right? So we decided that we didn't want to raise a child in New York City and moved the pin around the map. I did not want to go back to Kansas City. We didn't want to go north because we hate the cold. We didn't want to go south because there's fairly overt racism. We didn't want to go to California because it's going to fall off the map one of these days. We got as far as Oregon or Washington State. And then Roger, by then, had backed away. He had been the editor-in-chief of the New York Times Book Company and had, for a long time since then, been freelance as an editor, and he'd worked with a place called Lamont Doherty, which is the geological branch of Columbia, which was right in our backyard practically, for Barry Raleigh, who was the director at that time. Barry, who then, Roger came down the hill one day and said, well, Barry Raleigh's been hired away by SOAST in Hawaii. It's a science division of UH, I think.
Oceanography.
Yes.
Important stuff.
And I looked at him and I said, and he's going to need an editor, right, in a newsletter. So at that moment, we decided, okay, we're going to pick up and move to Hawaii. I had been here when I was 8 years old and never back since. But I remember liking it. What's not to like?
Yeah.
We came over on the Lurline. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
And left on the Matsonia. And I remember throwing my lei in the water, and that means I'm coming back. But years passed. And
Slide guitar?
Yeah.
Lap steel?
No, I just remember being really fat in a fake grass skirt and winning a hula contest on the way back. I mean, I was as wide as I was tall at that point.
This is hard to believe, but no, Roger.
But so that's how we got to Hawaii. We simply picked up, we had 1 year, a gap year, if you want to call it that, we left New York and we lived just outside Annapolis, working with the youngest, highest ranking member of the KGB ever to successfully defect, Victor Shemov. And it was so weird. His book was called Tower of Secrets, and it was about his life as a member of the KGB and Communist Party before he and his wife decided to leave, and then after. And it was just fascinating. Yeah. Wow. Victor, it was like I got to be the project editor. Roger did the overall editing, but I did the line editing. And with Russian, order word of, important not is. So I spent most of my time just untying the knots. And then the other challenge was that Victor was not a storyteller. He couldn't understand why I did theater. Eden, you have to do things more than once. I'm so bored. So he wouldn't give us all the details of his daily life, which of course is what people are desperate to know. What's it like
to pull it out.
Well, I would just make stuff up. And he would come out we were on the banks of the Chesapeake Bay, and I would send him pages, and he'd come back outraged. Then Olga would never say like that. She did not talk like that. I said, what did she say, Victor? And I'd be sitting there taking dictation.
You are a clever woman.
That's clever. Natasha, not stupid. But that was fun. So then,
well,
from
Mr.
there,
Blair did something like that similar to the New York Times, but he got canned for it. That's another
well, I wouldn't have let the fiction go forward,
Yeah.
but it provoked what I needed to provoke, right?
You had to set the bait.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then from there, Hawaii back in 1992, and just have never looked back. I mean,
Goodness, and I'm going to interject here.
Go.
92, a lovely 22 years ago. Yeah.
22, 23 almost.
I mean,
yeah.
I feel like in that time period, Hawaii has changed greatly. So you've seen a lot of different changes in that time period. I don't know, what do you think? Or has it just been so consistent that it's, to me, when I think of like this past 20, 22 years, phew, crazy stuff.
I have to confess I'm a tree person,
Mhm.
which is to say I'm usually so focused on the specifics of what I'm doing that
Yeah.
I don't take a step back and look at, what is the social swing here? What's, what? So I'm sure enormously things have changed, but I haven't been aware of them because I've been hopping from, pillar to post.
It's all good.
Yeah, I think.
It takes all kinds. It
Well,
does.
it's been, what I've been amazed by, and I've seen this over the course of the 22 some odd years, people come here and then it works for them or it doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And what's the phrase? Hawaii either embraces you or spits you out, and
I was going to say it's a crapshoot, but
but
Yeah.
immediately, right?
Yeah.
And for both Roger and myself, it's been. I got here, I was still doing some of the final edits on Victor's book, and then I investigated the Alliance for Drama Education, George Kahn and Walt Delaney, two of the world's most graceful people. And I started immediately teaching as an artist educator.
Yeah.
And from that, it was like, oh, you can teach. Well, can you act? Would you like to come over here and act? Oh, you can act. How would you like to try and direct? HTY brought me in and gave me my first directing gig. Vanita Ray Smith opened Army, let me
Yeah.
direct for that. Waldorf invited me in to teach, which is where I met you.
Peer Gynt.
Peer
Oh my
Gynt.
gosh.
You taught the
Wow.
whole class to belly dance, boys
Yeah,
and girls.
I
It was
remember
so
that.
fun.
That was fun.
But-
Fun on a stick. And then Manoa Elementary.
That project, yes.
That was
yes, yes.
the Arabian Nights, like tsunami of just all things Arabian Nights.
That was the project that got started because it was the project after 2001. And I figured that our culture wasn't going to give a whole lot of credit to what we owe the Arabian culture.
Yeah.
Just as a kind of a backlash to the 9/11.
True.
So it's funny, each thing has just kind of hopscotched from one to the next to the next to the next. You asked me how I came to wear different hats. It's just add-on.
Yeah.
It's an unending process of add-on.
And I think that adaptability, which is something that people are now perhaps more aware of, because very few people have the option to work for a company for 40 years and get a gold watch, the good old days. They have to learn how to be adaptable. In your scenario, it was ahead of the curve. And I was thinking about this today, like people who are ahead of the curve, sometimes maybe people forget to acknowledge that because it's normal or it's perceived as normal, or maybe you're not appreciated as much because you have this ability to be adaptable and you precede what becomes the trend or the norm.
Oh, that's fascinating.
That's true. I was thinking about that.
Well, the
Things I
thing-
think about while brushing the teeth.
Yeah. Well, the thing about freelance existence, 5 years ago, before I took this job, the director of education at Hawaii Theater, my life made really no sense as I was living it forward. It just one thing is here, one thing's over there, one thing's over there, one thing's there. But when I accepted this job, it's like all of a sudden everything came into alignment. I make use of everything I have done with my life. I need it. I don't know what I would do without it. I can give you a case in point, just for
Please.
fun.
So yes, tell us about your position. So those who are unfamiliar.
This is a production of Much Ado About Nothing that just went off at the Hawaii Theater. It's one of the ensembles that I direct is the Hawaii Theater Young Actors Ensemble. Auditions coming up this summer. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But, okay, skip chase. 7 years ago, I was working with a fellow, Peter, what was Peter's last name? Oh dear, I'll think of it. Peter and, anyway, Klein. Okay, he's the leading Oxfordian. He's the president of the Oxfordian Society in the mainland. For those who don't know, there are two camps, at least two, but the two main, the Stratfordians, the people who believe that Will Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon was the man who wrote the plays, the guy who never left England in his life, the guy who didn't go beyond a 6th or 7th grade education, etc. Then there's the Oxfordian camp, who believes that there's no way this other fellow could have written as eloquently as he wrote about politics, art, medicine, law, science, philosophy. Italy. I mean, in great
Verona,
detail
fair
about
Verona.
Italy runs all through the canon,
Yeah.
right? And very specific locations which have since been tracked and found, right? Shakespeare never left England, okay? So I'm just saying. So I'm working with Peter Klein because Peter Klein was writing the what was to be the essential, the quintessential biography of Oxford. And his wife, Cyril, who is nothing if not very competitive, decided she was going to write the great Oxfordian novel and show without a shadow of a doubt how Oxford had to be the man who blah, blah, blah. So I had to learn. I mean, I was hired because as imaginative as Cyril was, she wasn't a writer. You know, so one of the things I do is ghostwrite. So I was
You're kind of like a Cyrano de Bergerac.
something like that. Only it wasn't
Without the nose.
it was no love letter. Anyway, so I worked with her cheek by jowl, and I would, during the time, I would say things to Peter, like, because we conversed periodically. I'd say, so Peter, what difference does it make, really? I mean, somebody wrote these beautiful poems, plays, etc., sonnets. Who cares if it was Oxford or Shakespeare or blah, blah, blah? And he said, you know, one of these days I'll prove to you that it really does make a difference. So time passes. The project didn't actually go anywhere because Cyril and I were kind of having a tug of war right the way through the process, and she just said, okay, we're done. So time passes. I get involved with the Hawaii Shakespeare Festival and in a production in Tony Pasculi, bless his heart, now in the 13th year, having done all of the plays in the canon. Very successful, exciting operation. And I'm playing one of the two people that holds Cleopatra up in Anthony and Cleopatra, Charmian, and who's the other one? Anyway, she always traveled in threes, the three of it. So, but the person who played the clown at the end, who brings the basket with the asp, takes Cleopatra out, could not learn the lines. And the reason they couldn't learn the lines is because it's this maybe a page and a half, 2 pages of the most bizarre gobbledygook.
Antiquated.
It has nothing to do with the rest of the play, and it just just out of context, etc. So I got on the phone with my dear friend Peter, and I said, Peter, maybe you can make your point now. If I send you this scene, would you please annotate it from an Oxfordian point of view, right? And then let me see if it makes a difference. Back comes the scene with the backstory that Oxford, and I'll get into this in a minute, Oxford was a longtime lover of Queen Elizabeth. She met him when he was 9 years old. I'll tell you more in a minute. She actually took his virginity when she brought him to the court to be the Lord of the Ewer.
This is supposed to be the Virgin Queen.
Well, there is a story there.
Yes.
So they had, because she was the Virgin Queen, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, everybody at court would have known about this affair and other affairs as well, but it could not be overtly referred to, could not be honored by,
no Twitter,
no nothing, right? So, and this caused a great deal of tension between them. He was looking to be, if not king, maybe royal consort, but he was aiming for the inner circle, so to speak, right? And she would have none of it. And so they would have periodically these knockdown, drag-out lovers' quarrels. And the argument for this particular scene is that there had been one of those quarrels, and he had gone a little too far and was in danger of some severe penalties, right, or something. So he had appended this scene with the clown and the asp, and every single one of the clown's lines, himself being the clown, right, is a very carefully coded apology to the Queen. And what each was referring to was then added in the annotation, and I gave it to the girl playing the clown. She came back the next day with the lines because she knew what it meant.
The context, yeah. I think Donald Sterling needs one of those Oxfordian people to help him. Help me! Craft this apology.
Oh, dear.
I think at the heart of the matter, and this is just my 2 cents, why does it matter? I think the ultimate thing is if you have any understanding or respect for ethics in the art and giving credit where it's due, and if you look at many practices, what you would do is you would cite your sources, or you pay homage to your teachers, your gurus, your senseis, your kumus or whatever. The idea that someone is receiving credit for something that they didn't create is very offensive. It's upsetting.
Well, it's tricky because in Oxford's day and age, in the Elizabethan age, the nobility was not allowed to practice any kind of craft or trade. So here you have, now it takes it and twists it a little bit. Here you have a man who is a lovely writer, an artist, a poet, a playwright, and he's not allowed to practice his craft, or if he writes it in his bedroom, right, nobody gets to see it. He doesn't get to see his stuff brought to life unless he passes it off to a shill.
Help us understand the mindset of the culture milieu. Would that be it's too avant-garde? Is it too risky? Is it low class?
Below the salt.
Okay.
The people who have nobility doesn't work for a
Blue
living.
bloods don't work.
Right.
That's why they have those soft hands.
Yes, right.
Oh my.
No. So, but the thing, to take it a little step further in the idea that nothing's ever wasted is, I had this year 20 in my Hawaii Theater Young Actors Ensemble, which is a group of kids who train. It's a pre-professional acting program. They train with me twice a week, 2 hours each after school. They have a phenomenal series of master classes in the fall, interleaved with work on short Shakespeare scenes so they can put what they're learning straight to work. And then in the spring, we do a complete Shakespeare. And this year, I had the most amazing mix of kids. They were focused, they were supportive, they were ready to be challenged. So what I did, I knew I was going to do Much Ado About Nothing. And Joss Whedon's wonderful movie had just come out. I didn't want to do just another Much Ado About Nothing. So I thought, okay, we're going to do a play outside the play. And we're going to have Queen Elizabeth, here she was. I don't know, where's the best place to hold it to?
Yeah, that's good.
We had Queen Elizabeth. The idea was that Oxford, we had one actor, Ari Dalbert, who played the De Vere. De Vere was the Earl of Oxford, Edward De Vere. He played the double. So De Vere is the one who has offended the Queen by having this knockdown, drag-out fight. The Queen has put him on notice that he now stands to lose lands, fortune, if not life. Oxford actually had a band of players, a company called Oxford's Men. And he reassembled them quickly. This is our concept. He got them back together very quickly. All of the kids had to be, and there were, out of 20, there were 16 girls and 4 guys, right? But they all had to be men because women didn't go on the stage in Elizabethan days. So each of the kids created their own Oxford's Man, complete with bio, background, how do they move, how do they walk, why do they get into theater, why are they doing
character study.
Totally, yes. And then each of those guys created one of the roles in Much Ado About Nothing. I had at one point cast one girl to be Elizabeth, the Queen, and Elizabeth made this amazing entrance in this huge, Hannah Shower Galley gave her this amazing costume, and she was terrifying, right? She came in through the theater, up across the stage. The tech guys at Hawaii Theater, bless their hearts, created the Hanamichi, which then let her throne be on top of what would be the VIP booth at the, it was, and so she made this entrance, and then she put the company of actors on notice that if the bell that she was carrying sounded, they were for it, right? So she sat there waiting to see if anything was going to upset her. They had to create, they began the play, and I'll tell you, the bell rang 3 times. And each time, the first time we saw Ari rewriting, he brought one of his other players on and took the script, wrote right here, and gave it to the girl playing Beatrice, and they had to do the new scene on the spot. I didn't change a syllable of the play, but it happened just at a plot point where the Queen interrupted, right? Another time when Hero goes down, she's slandered at the wedding in the church, the Queen rose up and came onto the stage and said, "You're insulting me with a bride. You promised me a comedy, and here a bride is dead at the wedding? This one would do." So Oxford gets all of his guys together, and he tells them they have to improvise. And it was such fun, all from the conceit of the whole Oxfordian, and they did so well. And then the other thing I was going to tell you, one, originally I had cast one girl as the Queen and one girl as Beatrice, but I couldn't, in all good conscience, I couldn't have one girl train for 9 months in how to play Shakespeare and then sideline her in a gorgeous costume as the Queen. So Beatrice and the Queen, each girl got 2 performances as the Queen and 2 performances as Beatrice.
Wow.
And it was challenging,
Yeah.
but, and then our Ari Dalbert, we were going to bring a shortened version of this to the Book and Music Festival, but that weekend Ari was in New York competing at the national level with the English-speaking union's Shakespeare competition, in which he placed in the top 10. I'm so proud of him.
Go Hawaii!
But we had to substitute somebody for him, you know. So we used a jester puppet, which was and we had 7 different kids play his role.
Like a politician.
Yes. No, I mean, Benedict is referred to as the prince's jester, so we figured it made sense.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun.
Now, this is the moment we just have to do at the Art of Life. It's that we're taking our small break. But you must stay tuned because there is so much more to discover with our wonderful guest, Eden Lee Murray.
Who just broke her microphone.
It's okay. That's what we got the break for. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Amashta, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Further north. So
Aloha, and we're back here at the Art of Life. Hey, it's been like 33 shows, and I had to be reminded to look at camera 2. This is what I'm talking about, improvisation, my friends. It's just, camera 1's got this delightful little green, yellow, and red light, and I just want to look at it, but that's not going to help our cause.
Well, fortunately, you got a great profile, so camera 1 got a nice view regardless.
I'll have my moments, my friends. My guest is the one and the only Eden Lee Murray Jelinek. You might know her as Eden Lee Murray. This is what happens when we have lots of names, just like me, Willow Chang, Leon, and you know, whatever works. As long as people remember us in some good context, we couldn't be happier. Right before we took the break, you were talking about these wonderful thespians. I wouldn't even say in training because they are thespians, producing these wonderful Shakespearean works. And I have to confess that I am a Shakespeare nerd, probably not as nerdy as your nerdy largesse. But at the school that I attended, it starts with a P, that's all you need to know. We had a Shakespeare festival under the direction of Maureen Price.
Oh.
And it was in April, and to celebrate Mr. Shakespeare, I hope I'm saying that properly, because that wasn't even discussed at the time in the 80s. Or at least at our school, and we'd wear our Elizabethan finery and go to math class and and science lab, and people thought I was completely insane, and I'm fine with that.
But did you perform?
Did.
Yeah.
And they would even construct a theater outside the globe, a mini globe,
Oh.
and I was Mercutio, and I prepared. Warning, Will Robinson, danger. I had a condom, a prophylactic, filled with ketchup. You can't make this up. For the combat scene, because they were only small snippets. We couldn't do all of Romeo and Juliet. Right. And when I was made mincemeat and worm's meat, I had a little safety pin rigged in my costume.
Oh, fun!
And bleh, the ketchup went everywhere. It was quite the scene.
Oh my goodness.
And I got into a little bit of hot water from administration because they thought I was sullying the costumes of the school, but I had my own Shakespearean costume that I had purchased at Diamond Head Theater when they had a costume sale, with my own tights and hat and everything, because I was a nerd, as I had mentioned. But Steve Wagenseller, who you may or may not
I do know him.
He loves to remind me of this because, you know, adults remember these things.
Was he teaching at the time? He must have
I
been.
think he was teaching at the time, and he says, "Do you remember when you had a condom filled with?"
And he would
with
articulate
ketchup?
it that clearly.
Yes, but you know what? What's cool stuff to be exposed to? Not necessarily condom. That was my own idea, but the opportunity to revisit these masterful works that are referenced so frequently. I mean, I think that these works, they transcend the concept of East or West or the white man's realm, classics are classics, whether they're Rashomon or Much To Do About Nothing. They expand our concept of the worldview. Perhaps you might hear some blowback from people here in Hawaii. Do people say, why do my kids need to learn Shakespeare? How is this going to affect their life? Or how is this going to help them get into college? Or why are these things important in 2014? Do you hear this, and what do you say?
I don't, because
God.
no, I don't, because when I get around to talking to parents or adults, they're saying, I can't believe what's coming out of my kid. I can't believe. I've seen my child grow so amazingly over the course of this year. What did you do? So they've been playing Shakespeare. Shakespeare characters are the opposite of whatever.
Yeah,
you know, it's
they're
like,
not the OC.
No. And
They're not Kardashians.
But in order to play them, you have to expand your horizons, you have to expand your energy, you have to commit. You know, these characters are not just mad, they're furious. They're not just kind of, oh, I like him a little bit. They're like passionately in love. And watching what happens to kids, for 7 years I ran the Kaimuki Shakespeare Festival, which gets all the kids from Pololo would get. It was an 8-week project. It's funny. It was an 8-week project. It would get, at its biggest year, it got over 800 very local kids up on stage for 2 days at the end of April, around Shakespeare's birthday, playing scenes for each other. It was organized by the more senior teachers of the speech and language teachers, who understand that you can't get Shakespeare by reading him. You have to taste him. You have to bring the characters to life.
This must have been the era before core curriculum.
Probably. This would have been in the 90s.
Yeah, the
90s,
good old days.
And crossing into the 2000s. But what was such fun, my first year I didn't know I was in for, and for the first 4 weeks I just wanted to go home and open a vein and just get it over with, because the kids would come at me in the hall.
It must be vertical.
So, yeah, right. But the kids would make fun of me in the hall. Oh, miss, blah, blah, blah. They would laugh at the exercises that we were doing and all that business. And then they would say things like, oh, miss, I cannot. And why can't we just speak it in English? I'm going, but you're talking about English when English was born, right? And, well, I'll get into that in a minute. But what was really funny, and I got to where after 3 or 4 years in the project, I could expect it. First 4 weeks were like pushing rocks uphill, whether it was the gifted classes or the special ed classes. But almost inevitably, somewhere in that 4th week, somebody in each class would pop. They'd get it. I mean, it's like the pan of popcorn. Poof, somebody gets it. And when they get it, they look so hot, right? So that the kids are like, miss, I can do that. Yeah, of course you can, but you got to step up.
Yeah.
I will never forget, speaking of Mercutio, this boy from deep in the Pololo Valley, he took on the role of Mercutio, and he was the one at the beginning, oh, miss, I cannot. By the end, when he was killed and carried off stage to expire, a plague on both your houses! I mean, he was still pigeon, but, it was so committed, and it was so beautiful.
It brings it to life.
And you see that happen again and again and again, and it's just, and for, as an educator, I think there's a lot out there where people dumb things down so the kids can do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, look at that, you were able to do blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything. If you set the bar up here, and a kid gets there, and they look back to where they came, and they go, whoa, the next time they face a challenge, they're going to be a little bit more eager to take it, you know?
I'm curious how many of your students made the connection that all the people they admire, possibly, in Star Trek and Harry Potter are products of Royal Shakespeare Company, and that training, and that they have that foundation. Did they make that connection? Did they say, oh my God, Captain Picard, he did Shakespeare?
My kids do, because the ones that are in the group tend to be the ones that are aware.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting thing. Sometimes, I mean, the mix, I have kids from public school, kids from private school, homeschool kids. I mean, it's, a lot of times in a public school, it's not cool to let people know you read Shakespeare for fun, but they can come into this group.
What?
Yeah, right. They can come into this group and they're in a circle of their peers.
Yeah.
And we have auditions coming up. Can I say something about that?
Please do.
We have 3 sets of auditions. It is a competitive audition situation. We're having them, let me get my little piece of paper, drum roll, on June the 9th, Monday, July the 21st, Monday, and August 4th, all at 4:30 p.m. on stage at the Hawaii Theater. You have to register. You need to give me a call. My number is 791-1397, just to get yourself on the list, and then I give you information
And
from
this
there.
is all accessible on the website?
It is on the
Okay,
Hawaii
cool.
Theater website.
Hawaii Theater website.
And you need, the audition has to be between 1 and 2 minutes of material from any published play. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. My job is to get them to where they can play Shakespeare. I love it if people take a swing at it, you know.
They could be like Mary Catherine Gallagher and like do a monologue from a made-for-TV movie.
And as long as they prove that they have taken the time to memorize something and practice it.
Yeah.
So I see some commitment from the start. And
Right.
then what I do is everybody goes up once, and then I give notes after each audition, and then they all get a second chance, so we can see, I can get a sense of how well they can incorporate the direction.
You know, theater is so interdisciplinary, and it's such an amazing commitment. And I would say in this world that is so fast-paced and so touch and go, the gift of theater to expose your kids to this is invaluable because it helps with their memory, it allows them to interact, it allows them to take direction, it allows them to learn something. It's working towards a communal goal. You know, there's a process and there's a direct result of all of that work. And something about memory. I mean, it's amazing. You know, I think if you talk to grandparents or people of a certain generation, they were expected to memorize whether it was the
Right.
Gettysburg Address or a certain poem, Robert Frost and what have you. And years later, they can still remember it to a T, those things, because it was expected of them. And I think people can hardly remember a phone number that they dial because it's programmed in the phone.
Right.
You know, or they cut and paste everything when they're working on a document. I have my students do journals, and half that stuff is Wikipedia, so at least I come down on them and I say you have to cite your sources. You can't just barf up someone else's information and pass it off as your own.
Right.
Theater allows for all of those cool things.
Well, and it's collaborative, and
Yeah.
I had a wonderful conversation with Michael Paikukui, who's the head of the Cathedral School. He's the
Okay.
principal. The school is in the process of shifting over to a all project-based school.
Wow.
And we were talking about, you know, what's involved and how the kids get, it's whole child, it's holistic, that's what theater is.
Yeah.
You know, it's collaborative, I don't understand, you know, the teachers who complain about the fact that kids are dissociated, they are disenfranchised, they're, you know, all in their little computers and stuff. And the first thing that gets taken away from the schools are the projects
Yeah.
that get the kids out of themselves and into each other. You know, I mean, what I worry about, and this is one of the reasons I love Shakespeare. At the Maui Writers Conference some years ago, there was somebody who was doing a book about the ill effects of texting and short speak.
Yeah.
You know, and for those of us who grew up with Shakespeare or language, or, you know, we know that texting or tweeting is just the tip of the iceberg for what language is and can be and can do. These kids don't have that context, right? And what I try to teach when I teach the kids is you give the frame of reference for Shakespeare, which is in those days, the average working vocabulary of an individual was somewhere between 10 and 15,000 words, okay? And Shakespeare had an operating vocabulary of 30, upwards of that, and when he didn't have just the right word, he would make something up. He would create another word or another phrase, right? So this was an age in which people, the man on the street took great pride in being able to completely articulate what he was thinking, what he was seeing, etc. Not whatever, you know, it's like not that.
The
So-
kind.
Right. So what is fun about the characters in Shakespeare, and I think kids are surprised by it and then intrigued by it, is that when somebody asks a character in Shakespeare a question, they get a real answer. And it's an answer.
Maybe even a soliloquy.
And maybe even a soliloquy. But the word that is chosen, the character has carefully chosen that word. So when you're playing Shakespeare, you can't just go through it. You have to find the process of the actor, or the actor has to find the process of the character deciding exactly which word is going to go in there and how it needs to be weighted so that whoever he's talking to can admire him for picking that word, right? It's all about being present and conscious.
You know, the other thing I was just thinking about, you were saying, is the joy of Shakespeare is the continuity factor. I mean, there's the causality. There's always an action for every reaction. And sometimes, you know, you might watch a sitcom or a movie and some character walks in and then they just disappear. And you're just like, well, what happened to that person? Or why did they say that? Why did they do that? They don't tie up those loose ends. Shakespeare, there's always an action and a reaction. You don't just have somebody waltz in for no apparent reason, which I think that in terms of like structuring your artistic expression, it makes sense. It's something that's so satisfying because you see that, and real life is a lot like that as well. You can't just do something. Random thought. I was explaining this to my husband. He's French. Yes, I know Shakespeare, but he hadn't read Othello. It wasn't required or needed, and he isn't as nerdy about these things yet. Hoping to convert him. But I was explaining to him, I was thinking about the hanky, right? Think of all of these terrible things that happen just as a result of an errant hanky that is dropped and all the misunderstandings. And I was saying, like, this is something that's as old as time. I mean, you know, when people say, well, where there's smoke, there's fire, I said, not always the case. I mean, it's all about interpretation. It's how you're choosing to interpret those facts and those actions and what your perception of truth is. And that's such a great play, that example of that example, you know?
I'm
My
thinking
goodness.
of doing that one, not next year, but down the line. I have a potential Othello in the group. We're doing Romeo and Juliet next year.
You know, did you have a chance to see Ram Leela when it was playing?
No.
Oh, you must. So Ram Leela is the Bollywood interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. It came out last year.
Can it be downloaded?
Oh,
Can
yes.
it be rented? Ram Leela.
I have my own copy. I just showed it to my Bollywood students who are in high school, and I figured that they would really enjoy that. Bansali, Leela Bansali, just an amazing director. I didn't give his full name, my apologies. But it was so interesting to see what parts that they really tried to parallel the structure. You know, it's loosely based on it, but there's enough of the element. And the rose, you know, that which we call a rose, they liken that to rice. So they liken that simile to rice instead of a rose. Like it's very it's cleverly done. Like, would you eat rice if it weren't called rice? And I'm paraphrasing it, and of course I'm getting it secondhand because I'm relying on the subtitles. I'm not able to understand what's said actually in Hindi. I'm sure the poetry is even richer, but it's fascinating. You know, this has had a worldwide effect on people everywhere.
The Japanese. I remember when I was where was I? It was either Harvard or New York, I don't remember which, but there was a language company that they would use Romeo and Juliet, maybe other Shakespeare plays as well, but I was brought in to record some Romeo and Juliet. There would be language clubs for children in Japan. For the little bitty ones, it's like a Girl Scout troop or something. They would come home after school and they would have very, 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 very simple versions of Romeo and Juliet, and they would read the play and learn the play and memorize, right? Then they would, like, for example, I remember one that we did is, you know my face is red because you heard me speak my thoughts. That, you know, thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would a maiden's blush bepaint my cheek for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. That's when you get to be a senior in Japan, you know.
Wow,
but
boy.
Very, 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 very simple, right? But the value is in the story. I mean, it is amazing. There was a fellow who came out here to speak at UH, and I'm trying to remember his name. He was talking about a project that took a Shakespeare play. Oh, well, that's a different story entirely. But I was just listening on Shakespeare's birthday. Right. The National Company, I believe, is going to be they're going to be playing Hamlet in every single country around the world. Wow. And I remember listening to this guy talk, and it's funny because he was saying, well, the question that the interviewer gave him was, well, what are you going to do when it's, you know, places that don't really have a theater? He goes, we'll play it on the beach. Yeah. We'll play it and I'm talking about being ahead of the curve, right? Last year when we did Hamlet here, which was a wonderful, again, the kids created a company of actors, and each actor created their characters. And the idea was that they blew into the Hawaii. We didn't have a set. We had some platforms that were just kind of haphazardly configured. Right. They blew into the Hawaii Theater with a couple of trunks, and they just kind of moved the boxes around where they needed it, right? And they pulled stuff out of the trunks, and there was Hamlet. And it all disappeared back into the trunks and it was over. I love, you know, deconstructionism is
really essential because it helps break barriers. Because it's very easy for people to say, oh, but we can't do this because we don't have the budget, or we don't have the interest, or we don't have the costumes. And it's like, in the end, yes, those things hold some value, but ultimately the most important thing is the passion, the desire, the interest to do it. That's what you need more than anything, because you can have all the other stuff, and if you don't have those three things, then what's the point?
Well, the thing that I teach my kids always is that the stuff of a production, and I do try and get really nice costumes. I've been very lucky with designers.
They're
but
beautiful.
Yeah, but the fact is you don't need the perfect. I mean, I prefer the less what's the word I want? No, the more abstract.
Yeah.
So that the audience has to go with you to say that this bar is actually a tree. Because I say, and the point is, if the company plays with commitment and passion and the law of the storyteller, I'm the storyteller, it's so because I say it's so, and you're going to get that. Audiences love that. And audiences are like, in a sense, they're like children who don't want to worry about the parents being insecure. You know, and everybody who comes into the theater, I don't care how old they really are, they're about 5 years old as they go through that portal into the auditorium, right? And they're sitting there in their seats going, tell me a story, and I want you to really, really believe it so I can really, really believe it. I don't want to worry about you, yeah? And if you play with that kind of, bam, I've got you by the throat and I'm not letting you go, they'll go wherever you want to take them.
Yeah, and as Tancred said, Iron Man. I mean, people believe Robert Downey had that thing in his chest. It's the suspension of disbelief, and it's great storytelling, and that's what we all desire. We want more storytelling. We want more time. Why does it go by so fast?
Is it done?
It is.
We pal?
We're pal.
Oh.
It bums me out in a really big way. But you know what? You're just right up the street, and you're going to be on my long list of repeat offenders. We must have you again because there's all kinds of projects. Perhaps when we get a little deeper into the summer and you have your crew, if you guys want to come on.
I would love that. I want to talk
that.
about Eddie Wengo, the project that's coming up at the Hokulea.
We have an image. Maybe you can just see that before we get booted off.
There we go. In September, we're bringing in Eddie Wengo, the story of the upside-down canoe, which is written by Marion Lyman Merzero, who was the only female. You had her as a teacher at Canoe,
did.
yes? She was the only female crew member on the Hokulea. She was on board. Her brother, Dave Lyman, was captain the night that it hoolied, and Eddie Aikau sacrificed himself to try and go paddle for help.
Yeah.
She's written a beautiful children's story and then a play.
And so timely now that the Hokulea just was launched.
Absolutely, and I'm presenting it, and it's Mark Branner from UHTYA department has got his graduate student. It's going to be very, very, very exciting.
That
I'll
is
tell you
exciting.
more.
All kinds of good things happening at Hawaii Theater. If you haven't been there, they have tours almost
With
daily.
Tuesdays?
On Tuesdays. Beautiful Beaux-Art restoration. Just a beautiful gem in the heart of Honolulu.
And 3
Simply
ensembles.
wonderful.
The high school ensemble, the junior ensemble for middle schoolers who don't know anything about theater but want to try it, and then for 12 to 15-year-olds, the intermediate ensemble for kids who've had some classes, maybe mine, and they want to go a little bit further but they're not ready for pre-professional yet.
How about Old Futs? Anything for Old Futs
Not
yet?
Not
It's
yet.
got to happen.
Not yet. There's just one of me right now.
I've been so honored to have you as the guest. Please come back again. And for those of you who aren't aware, it's The Art of Life. We've got a Facebook page, Art of Life with Willow Chang. I've got all the archival back episodes there. Please send that link and share it to your friends. Tell your friends about our show. It helps really put the focus and the spotlight on Hawaii where it really deserves to be. Have a wonderful weekend. Keep it pono. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Aloha.